When I was 12 years old, our family went through a huge change. After my parents divorced, my mom took my sister and me away from the busy city to a quiet town near Saitama Prefecture, close to Gunma Prefecture. The air here was rich with the scent of soil and old trees, surrounded by dense forests and wide fields. Our new home was an old, weathered bungalow, its wooden structure creaking in the wind, as if it had its own stories to tell. Although our new home was simple, it had a musty and chilly air. My mom's careful arrangement made it a warm place. Apart from us and the kind elderly couple across the street, there seemed to be no other houses around. As night fell, the area would sink into a deathly silence, broken only by the wind and occasional animal noises. Life was mostly calm here until one afternoon during the holidays, when things turned unusual. Mom went to work, leaving my sister and me at home. I was particularly happy that day, running and playing in the yard, until a strange yet familiar voice suddenly interrupted my joy. It was my mom's voice, calling my name from the direction of the front gate. Instinctively, I ran towards the voice but found no one outside. Then the voice came from another side of the house. It was my mom's, sounding unusually cheerful. I followed the voice, but never seemed to catch up. Suddenly, the voice moved inside the house. Although it was strange, I went in to search. The voice seemed to come from a storage room that was usually unoccupied. As I stood at the door, an unknown fear overwhelmed me. The voice inside became eerie, no longer the gentle tone of my mother, but something malicious. Just as I was about to touch the doorknob, my sister grabbed me in panic, pulling me into the living room. We shared our experiences. My sister was pale, hearing no voices, but feeling something terrifying had entered the house. Soon, the grandparents from across the street came over and informed our mother. That night, they brought people from the shrine to perform some rituals, telling us we wouldn't hear the voices anymore. However, it didn't end there. One day after school, we found our home had been robbed, and the charms from the shrine were destroyed. That night, my sister and I heard terrifying calls outside the door, using our mother's voice to summon us. In fear, we clung to each other until the voices stopped. A few days later, our mom suddenly decided to move. Years later, we asked her why, and she grimly mentioned seeing something horrifying outside the door one night before moving. She never elaborated on what it was. From then on, whenever we mentioned the old house and its incidents, Mom would become tense, urging us to forget those terrifying experiences. I never knew what that terrifying thing was, and perhaps only those who have seen it can understand the fear, and I hope never to encounter it again. This happened when I was about 6 years old, living in a rural area of Toyama Prefecture. One morning, just as dawn broke, my father decided to go to the next town to buy some supplies, and on a whim, I insisted on going with him. Despite my stubbornness, he agreed, and we set off on foot together. Our town was separated from the next by a small hill, and there was no tunnel at the time, so the quickest way was over the hill, a 20-30 minute walk. I remember walking along the ridges of the fields with my father. As we turned a corner, he led me onto a path towards the hill. It was a narrow trail, just wide enough for 2 people, made of gravel and stones. We walked up the path, passing through a bamboo forest, which was the only open area on the road where you could see the town's scenery. It was truly beautiful. As we continued deeper into the hill, the trees became taller and more numerous. The bamboo and the wild trees blocked much of the sunlight, making it surprisingly dark even in broad daylight. I wasn't scared at the time because I was with my father, and I just enjoyed the coolness of the shade. As we neared a bend in the path, I saw a fork leading upwards to the right. This side path seemed to lead into the woods and was covered in fallen leaves and branches, looking long unused. I then noticed a figure, an old man in tattered clothes and a hat, coming down from that path. We slowly passed the bend, and I watched the old man slowly descend from the right path. He seemed like a farmer living in the hills. Nothing seemed unusual about him, except that his hat was pulled down low, covering his face. As we passed and continued left, I kept my eyes on the old man. He turned and started following us, maintaining a certain distance. I told my father that there was an old man following us. He looked back and saw no one, but when I looked again, the old man was indeed there. Suddenly, my father picked me up and ran desperately. As he carried me, I could see the old man behind us, picking up speed, quickly closing the distance between us. His hat flew off due to the running, revealing a horrifying sight. His head was only half there, with everything below the eyes to the chin missing. The upper part of his head and his neck were connected by a bamboo stick. My heart raced with fear, and I could barely breathe. Just as the old man was about 3 large steps away from us, my father burst out of the hill's path. The old man stopped at the edge of the hill, staring intently as we ran out. After passing a graveyard and entering the village, my father shared the incident with an uncle from the neighboring village. The uncle explained that what we saw was a protective entity formed by the ancestors' collective will, guarding the people of the village within the hill. It usually roamed the forest between the hillside shrine and the ancient tombs, and occasionally wandered onto our path. As time passed, the entity aged with it. The uncle mentioned that the older generation used to see a younger form of this entity, but now it appeared as an old man. Perhaps, with the passage of time, the entity would eventually fade away. Since then, until I grew up, I never dared to enter that hill again. This happened when I was about 9 years old, living in a small mountain village in Shizuoka Prefecture, Japan, surrounded by dense bamboo forests and ancient cedar trees. The village was tranquil, yet mysterious, especially at dusk, when everything seemed to be enveloped in a serene yet enigmatic twilight. One day, my friend Kenta and I decided to go on an adventure in the woods behind the village. We had heard from the elders about an old shrine there, neglected and unattended, but still visited by villagers during festivals to offer their prayers and gifts. Curiosity led us along a leaf-covered path deeper into the quiet woods. As we went further, the sounds around us faded until only our footsteps and occasional chimes filled the air. Kenta mentioned legends of spirits and yokai in these woods, and my heart started to race with a mix of fear and excitement. After about half an hour, we finally reached the forgotten shrine. It looked old and mysterious, with moss-covered stone lanterns and a frayed Shimenawa rope at the torii gate. Just as we approached, a bone-chilling breeze swept through, bringing an uneasy feeling. Suddenly, Kenta pointed towards the back of the shrine, where he saw something moving in the trees. We held our breath and looked closely, only to see a vague figure flitting between the trees, its hollow eyes seemingly fixed on us, emitting an eerie glow. Then, out of nowhere, the figure screamed, a sound filled with agony and rage. We turned and ran as fast as we could, but it felt like we couldn't escape its presence. Glancing back, I saw the figure closing in on us with incredible speed, its face twisted in horror, emitting roars not of this world. We managed to run back to the village, panting and frightened, and told the adults about our encounter. They were shocked and explained that the land was cursed because the previous generation had angered the mountain god, leading to many tragedies in the village. After that day, I never dared to step foot into those cursed woods again. The experience was like a nightmare, etched deeply in my memory. In the stillness of the night, I can still feel the cold wind and hear the scream echoing in my ears, reminding me never to forget the terror of that day.